Toddler abducted at daycare. 18 years later, Mom reads a fashion magazine and sees it was a crisp autumn afternoon on October 14, 2005, in the hollowed hills of southern Appalachia, deep in the Blue Ridge foothills beyond Asheville, North Carolina, when little Ella Marin vanished from the cozy steps of Little Acorn Daycare. She was just shy of her second birthday. The mountain air, heavy with maple and oak sap, grew dark with dread as Clara Marin realized her daughter had disappeared like morning fog at high noon. The year is now 18 autumns later, October 2023. Southern Appalachia remains unchanged in many ways. Narrow, winding roads cut through rich Appalachian soil, modest farms cling to time-worn ridges, and front porches on painted clapboard houses stand like watchful elders over creaking rocking chairs and whiskey barrels. Asheville, the county seat, bustles quietly these days. Coffee houses tucked between historic churches, a regional sheriff's office that still remembers the old ways, and a public library where the scent of pine wood floors and sweet magnolia lingers in the stacks. It was here at that library that Clara Marin has worked for the past 20 years, cataloging books and quietly holding on to a mother's hope. 18-year-old Ella Marin disappeared in 2005. At nearly 2 years old, she was a chubby toddler with bright brown eyes and a distinctive violet birthmark shaped like a lotus blossom near her left eye. It was a mark Clara would trace by memory when rocking her to sleep by firelight. It was that same mark, that same swirl that made Clara's heart thunder when she spotted a familiar face in a glossy fashion magazine last month. In these mountains, traditions die hard, and loyalties go deeper than granite roots. People call each other by their barn name or farm name, not by digital handles. When something like this happens, not in your family, but close enough, the crows hush on the power lines. Folks talk behind their front doors. The sheriff might shake his head sighing, but he'll still drop by the coffee shop at sunrise to check for rumors. And the church potluck long tables drowned in fried chicken butter beans. Sweet tea holds more secrets than any log cabin detective's file. At 45, Clara moves with careful grace through the library's labyrinth of dark oak stacks. Her hair, once soft chestnut, now shows silver strands framing a face both weathered and strong. She wears flannel shirts and faded denim old-time clothes for an Appalachian woman who hasn't left town nor given up hope. Every day she parks her old Chevy at the gravel lot behind the library, opens the door, and breathes the same damp mountain air she can't flee from, nor could she. Nightly she screens suspicious magazine racks for any sign of Ella, a face, a birthmark, a ripple in time that might echo her daughter's story back. Her colleagues know her habit. They nod in solidarity. They also keep an eye out for mountain myths, for gossip, for anything. 2 weeks earlier, a glossy issue of Southern Vogue arrived, its glossy cover blazing "The New Elegance" in a font as smooth as satin bright red against golden sunlight. Inside was a photo of a young woman on a tobacco farm several ridges over in eastern Tennessee. She stood tall in denim and off-shoulder red strong hands resting on a fence rail. And by her left eye, there it was again, that same violet lotus-shaped birthmark. Clara's pulse hammered the rhythm of Appalachian drums. She nearly dropped the magazine carton as though struck. The farm's byline read, "Kentucky Ridge, Appalachia, age 20, Emmy Wells." Emmy Wells, the age matched. The face was different, older, but Clara would recognize that birthmark in any mirror, in any crowd. A flicker of hope wove with dread through Clara's mind. Was this a case of fate reaching out, or some cruel trick of a shutter's angle and light? The story, written in 10 lines of elegant prose, praised Emmy as one of the hardest-working young women lifting America's rural spirit. It felt knowingly mystical, as if Appalachia's own lost daughter had stepped into whitewashed frames of high fashion. Southern men, her age, friends in pickup trucks retired, Coal mining hands would say Clara was grasping straw hats in hopes of wind. But in these hills faith and evidence are kin. Nothing blossoms without roots. Now emptied coffee in hand, Clara sat at her librarian desk under fluorescent light that fought the fading gray sky of late October. She flipped the magazine to the centerfold images, hands, faces, farms lit by dust in the afternoon, but her eyes never left the portrait of Emmy Wells. At 2:15 p.m., the polished hush of the library felt too calm. Determination settled in her chest like Appalachian granite. She picked up the phone with steady hands. Every fiber of her being said, "Call Detective Holden now." Clara stepped urgently from the library into the autumn chill. Gravel crunched under her boots as she dashed across the parking lot. Her mind churned. Is this real? Is it possible she drove the winding two-lane road toward the Asheville Sheriff's Office, the yellow lines cutting through ridges like lifelines? Detective Gary Holden greeted her with a measured nod. He'd aged hair flecked with gray deep lines around his eyes, but his stance was steady. He ushered her behind a secure wooden door. I saw the photo, Clara said, setting the magazine on his desk. Emmy Wells, age 20, Appalachian farm girl. All the signs match. Holden studied the birthmark violet lotus shape, unmistakable. I'll run facial recognition through our missing persons database, he said, pulling on blue latex gloves. Clara watched with tight lungs. As Holden tapped away at his computer, the office light buzzed above. Outside windows looked over quiet streets lined with aging maples. Holden paused. Nothing yet. But I'll reach out to neighboring jurisdictions. Knoxville, Chattanooga, Greenville. Someone may have seen her. Clara nodded. They made plans she'd narrow down the farm location, and Holden would request print editions of local fashion magazines for cross-reference. He handed her a stack of papers. Help me verify this is her, he instructed. Back home, Clara slept fitfully. When dawn broke, she reviewed western North Carolina road maps, circling tobacco farms east of Asheville. Her hands trembled as she noted possible addresses: Tennessee Ridge, Carter County, close to Kentucky border. She printed them like prayer cells. Morning found Clara pulling on old boots and flannel. She loaded her beat-up Chevy with Essentials water magazines, photographs of Ella, her birth certificate. She left a voicemail for Holden. I'm going with Plan A. Going east toward Carter County farms. She hit the highway into thick hardwood forests that draped the mountains. Appalachian ridges rolled like waves, their blue horizon fading into sky. She passed faded barns, rusting farm implements, half swallowed by tall grass. She stopped for directions in a general store near Pine Creek. Looking for Carter Ridge Farms, she said. The clerk, a woman with silver braid and warm eyes, offered a list of family-run farms. Clara squeezed the slip. On it, one entry stood out: Kessler Farm, near Little Salem Word. The name echoed the photo credit in Southern Vogue: Kessler Farm, Kentucky Ridge. Her breath caught. She drove on, clutching the wheel. The gravel road narrowed. A mail sign read, Kessler Farm established 1882. Clara pressed the brakes and guided the Chevy to the shoulder. A red barn with white trim sat behind a fence. Faint silhouettes of crop rows stretched beyond. She parked and stared at the farmhouse porch, empty in early morning light. Her heart pounded. She stepped out and approached the gate, voice trembling. Hello, anybody here? Silence answered. She walked onto the dirt driveway, boots sinking into soft earth. She heard footsteps from the porch. A man, middle-aged, sturdy, blue jeans and flannel, took cautious steps down. Weathered face, gentle eyes, a farmer. He listened as she spoke in controlled tones. I believe someone from this farm may have been in a fashion magazine. I'm looking for information. He studied her for long seconds before saying, You mean my granddaughter? His voice cracked. Clara froze. The farmer's young granddaughter. Your granddaughter. Emmy Wells. He nodded slowly. Lived here last month helping with harvest. Real soft-spoken girl. Left 3 days ago, didn't say where she went. Inside his farmhouse, he pointed to a ledger. Last entry, a phone number with the name Rowan. Number rang. No answer, voicemail full. But there was an address, Pine Hollow ARD, marked with faded ink. Clara's chest tightened. She scribbled it in her journal. Her Chevy next to a pickup, she set a GPS and inhaled deep. One step closer. On the drive, she imagined Ella's voice, soft, cautious. She held the phone to her ear and dialed Detective Holden. He answered groggily. Got the number. Heading there now. It's Rowan's farm, she whispered. Be careful, Holden warned. Remote area. Let me know before you go in. She parked about a mile from the address and walked through brush. Appalachian hush hung heavy. The farm appeared a modest cabin, smoke curling from chimney goats bleeding behind low fencing. She knocked on the door. A younger man opened, late 20s, rugged, cautious. The same birthmark glittered on his face. Emmy, she asked gently. He stared, then voice cracked. I don't know who you are. He closed the door. Clara's heart sank. She whispered into the woods. Please. The breeze whispered back. She slid to the ground, tears sliding. She'd gone this far. Was she too early, too reckless? Moments later, the door cracked open again. The young man, Emmy, stood guarded but curious. Clara held up the photo. It's you, my daughter, Ella. He stared at his own image. The air between them held 18 years of unknown truth. Then he stepped aside. Come talk. Clara's hand trembled. She rose, hope swirling like morning mist. Two strangers bound by blood, and mystery would speak. Appalachian earth held its breath. He led her inside, closing the door gently behind them. The cabin was simple wooden walls, lined with framed photos, landscapes, livestock, and one of him as a child beside a softball trophy. Emmy or Ella watched Clara copy the living room eyes, flicking over every object like pages in a long-forgotten diary. Clara spoke first, voice. Soft, your name. You go by Emmy Wells. He nodded, hands buried in pockets. I was raised by the Kesslers. Emmy Wells. But my birth certificate. He stopped, looked at her photo. His eyes widened. It says, Ella Marin. Same birthmark. Clara's breath caught. It's you. You were taken 18 years ago. Images of the past, police tape, media buzz, emotional posters flashed in her mind. She showed him photos, Ella in daycare, laughing at a puppet show, clutching a teddy bear. Each snapshot for him was a punch, but he leaned closer. Why did they lie? He asked, voice barely audible. She swallowed. They owed debts. They needed money. They purchased you through an intermediary. She gave him the magazine, the issue spread open to his face. This is how I found you. He traced the grain of the photo on the page. They looked after me, but kept me isolated. They said it was for safety. His jaw tightened, but I never questioned it. Until tonight. Clara nodded. It was survival for them, for you. Tears rimmed his eyes. I didn't know my adoption was illegal. I thought they were my parents. He paced, voice low. My mom, Maurice, she worked at daycare. She disappeared after taking you. They told me she killed herself. He paused. Now I realize it was staged, Clara breathed. And why the Kesslers told Rowan to hide you, afraid of traffickers. She paused, afraid the network would come back. He clenched his fists. I need to know who I am. He sank onto a worn couch, face in hands. Clara sat beside him. You are my daughter, Ella Emmy, 2 names, 1 person. She handed him a childhood bracelet with his name etched in silver. I saved this. He stared at it, fingers trembling. A single tear rolled down his cheek. He looked up at her, voice trembling. I want to go with you, find out everything. Clara smiled through her tears. We will do it together. A loud knock rattled the door. Both looked up. Mom, he whispered, rising slowly. Clara held his gaze. Stay. He paused, torn, then stepped back as someone entered, Detective Holden, flanked by 2 officers. He cleared his throat. I'm here to follow up. We've confirmed your birth records, Ella Marin, born with your birthmark match DMV and hospital data. We're ready to take a formal DNA test, but we have probable cause to initiate charges against the Kesslers and Rowan for kidnapping and trafficking. Ella exhaled. So everything is real, Holden nodded. Yes, but there's more. A trafficking ring may still be active. Your testimony could be critical. Clara placed a hand on Emmy's shoulder. We will do this. The detective produced documents, court orders, warrants, a map of trafficking routes linked to Rowan's farm network. Emmy stared, face pale. My life is bigger than me now, Clara whispered. We'll take it step by step. Holden added, you'll need to testify, and I'll arrange protective custody for you both tonight. Emmy nodded. Then let's start with DNA. Holden smiled gently. There's a mobile unit outside. Clara reached for Emmy's hand. They walked out together, mother and daughter, side by side. Outside, a black SUV waited. Emmy hesitated, looking at Clara. Mom Clara squeezed her hand. Together. They approached the vehicle. Lights glinted in the Appalachian night, illuminating determination in their eyes. A new chapter beginning under the starlit sky. The road ahead was long trials, revelations, reunions, but for the first time in 18 years, hope guided their path. Clara and Emmy sat in the back of the SUV, headlights cutting through towering pines. Clara's grip tightened on Emmy's hand as the engine rumbled to life. They didn't speak. No words were needed. On the ride, less than 30 minutes, the mobile lab parked by the roadside. The technician, a calm woman in scrubs, stepped out, guiding them through the testing process. Emmy remained silent, scanning the woods, sunlight flickering through branches. Clara watched her daughter's profile, familiar curves of jawbone, the arch of eyebrows, wondering how much of Ella remained inside Emmy. They returned to the SUV. The detective, no longer Holden, but someone more bureaucratic, sat opposite them. He began reading from a set of documents. Emmy examined each line: federal kidnapping charges, trafficking, conspiracy, identity fraud. Clara traced the columns with her fingertip. You're safe, the detective reassured. Protective custody. Next steps involve court appearance. The Kesslers and Rowan have been detained. Emmy studied her reflection in the window, the birthmark, a violet stamp in moonlight. Her voice trembled. Will they ever let me see where I live now? The detective clarified. You'll have options with your mother or a secure facility until you decide. Clara answered before Emmy could. I want her with me. No facility. Detective nodded, making notes. Later, at a government safe house, Clara used trembling fingers to unwrap old mementos from her purse. A stuffed lamb, a faded crayon, drawing a lock of Ella's first haircut. Emmy touched each item slowly, memory stirring fragments of laughter, the smell of lavender lotion, bedtime songs. Clara watched Emmy's eyes water. Did I ever forget you? Emmy looked away. I thought I remembered, but it's like trying to recall a dream after waking. She held the lamb to her chest, voice quiet. Does it hurt? Clara's throat closed. It still hurts not knowing, but now we're together. Emmy nodded. They cried quietly in the lamplight. Morning clarified in sunlight, the mountains gleamed. Detective arrived with court documents. Court is set for Monday morning, Asheville County. Magistrate will hear charges. You'll both need to testify. Emmy stood firm. I will. The detective outlined protection measures, separate entrances, escort, limited press access. Clara nodded, grim determination in her eyes. They left the safe house. Clara rented a car. They drove down winding Appalachian roads toward Asheville. They passed homesteads, forest trails, local churches. Emmy watched wide-eyed at the rural world she never knew. At a roadside diner they stopped. The waitress, a weathered woman, offered Southern comfort coffee and biscuits. Emmy sipped, looking at Clara. This tastes like my childhood too. Clara smiled through tears. They talked quietly. Emmy asked about her father David in Colorado. Clara explained he'd moved on, but would welcome contact when Emmy was ready. They planned for court outfits, testimony rehearsal statements. Clara promised to support Emmy every step. Emmy reached across the table and squeezed her mother's hand. Outside the diner, the mountains beckoned. The air smelled of pine and rain. Clara rested her hand on the car roof. "We have the rest of your life to rebuild," Emmy nodded. "And we'll start tomorrow with the truth." The second chapter of their reunion closed with the sun setting behind Appalachia's ridges, their silhouettes framed by fading maple leaves. They sat in the car, ready to face what lay ahead together, with courage born of 18 years apart, and a future anchored in reality, not memory. Clara's eyes fluttered awake before dawn. The Appalachian morning was cool mist drifting between the pine and oak. Emmy slept beside her, curled in the thin motel blanket, breathing steady and unguarded. Clara reached over, brushing a stray lock of hair from Emmy's forehead, the familiar curve of her cheek still surreal. They had no time for rest. Court loomed at 9 a.m. Already Clara's phone buzzed, the detective confirming pickup at 7:30. She gently shook Emmy awake. "Emmy," she whispered, "it's time." Slowly, reality returned in Emmy's gaze. She rose and dressed, choosing a pale blue blouse and black skirt Clara had laid out, modest, respectful, purposeful. In the lobby, the detective smiled supportively. Ready, Clara squeezed Emmy's shoulder. Across the parking lot, they entered a black SUV. Emmy glanced back at the motel, their refuge. It had been sanctuary, but now they moved toward judgment. The courtroom was small, wood-paneled pew benches, filling with murmuring strangers. Local press squeezed in at the back. The judge, austere and neutral, called the session to order. Detective Holden stood to present the case. Kidnapping, human trafficking, identity fraud. Charges were read. Clara and Emmy listened, hearts pounding in tandem. Their joint presence both charged the air and assured the court a united front. Next came testimony. Clara stood first. Her voice, though wavering under emotion, was clear. "My name is Clara Marin. I lived in Asheville. My daughter Ella disappeared at age 2. Today I affirm Emmy Wells is Ella Marin. The birthmark, the years of searching, they have led to this day." She showed baby photos. The jury gazed, some visibly moved. Reporter pens scratched. Emmy followed. She spoke quietly but steadily. "I grew up with the Kesslers believing they were my parents. I was Emmy Wells. I never knew the real story until recently. The birthmark, the photos, I realize now who I was meant to be. I have regrets, anger, confusion, but I want the truth." Her words brought tears to Clara's eyes. Emmy nodded, meeting her mother's gaze. Next came cross-examination of Rowan and the Kesslers. Their testimony was tense, defensive. The judge cut short evasions. Rowan quietly admitted creating the trafficking connection. The Kesslers admitted paying for a child they were told was abandoned. The supermarket of tears squawked in the courtroom as the charges piled. By noon, the judge ordered no bail for Rowan and the Kesslers. Trafficking rings had deeper connections. Emmy and Clara were allowed to leave under protection. A meal near the courthouse, cold sandwiches but warm hearts. They discussed next steps, therapy, identity documents, contacting David. Emmy asked, "Can I take your name?" Clara answered, "Yes. Ella Marin is yours too." Emmy nodded, tears soft but hopeful. Evening fell back in Asheville. They returned to the safe house to pack for the night. Clara had reserved local counseling for next day. Emmy packed carefully, her hands steady. Mementos from Clara, photos, letters, were folded gently. She put on a small wooden pendant. Clara had chosen a lotus, carved in walnut, echoing her birthmark. Silent, they stepped outside. The town glowed warm under streetlights. They walked side by side toward dinner at a small southern bistro. The veteran waitress from before was there. Recognition and compassion shone in her eyes. Dinner was quiet. Comfort, mashed potatoes, fried chicken, buttermilk biscuits. Their first meal as mother and daughter together. They talked. Emmy asked about Clara's search. Clara spoke of nightly prayers, roadside flyers, implausible leads. Emmy asked about David. Clara explained he'd remarried, but asked about his past. They planned a future reunion. Emmy would meet him. They strolled afterward through the small town square, lanterns and a fountain benches where lovers once sat. Clara paused. "This is your town now, too," she said softly. Emmy reached out and took her hand. Home. That night, Emmy lay awake. Clara watched her and whispered, "You belong." Emmy responded with a faint, confident voice, "I know now." They slept together in the same bed, mother and daughter reunited at last. Though danger lingered, the trafficking network, Rowan's unknown connections, they were no longer lost. Each mountain-winding track, each diner and court line had led to this moment. Dawn would come again. They would fight. They had the truth, the name each other, and that was enough for now. Shadows of morning light crept beneath the curtains as Clara stirred first. Emmy lay beside her, sleeping more peacefully than the night before. Clara's heart clenched. They'd come so far, but the journey ahead was only beginning. Rising quietly, Clara dressed and tiptoed into the small living area of the safe house. She brewed coffee, the rich aroma filling the room and calming her racing thoughts. Today was courtroom day 2, the evidentiary hearings. They'd sift through records, the trafficking network's trail, but most important, Emmy's decision on reclaiming her identity legally. Emmy joined her, pulling a quilt around her shoulders. "How long until we go?" she asked softly. Clara gestured toward the clock. It was early. "A few hours. We don't need to rush." She handed Emmy a mug. "It's going to be a long day." Emmy nodded. Clara studied her daughter, her patterns of speech, that tilt of her head when she thought. All familiar, yet new. They drank in silence before Emmy spoke. "Mom, what if David doesn't want to meet me?" Clara's heart tightened. He might be scared. She shrugged. "But you deserve the chance. I'll support your choice." Emmy dipped her head, thoughtful. The tension in her shoulders eased. At the courthouse they arrived just before the session began. Detective Holden greeted them with a nod. The courtroom was sparse now. Only legal teams, a few reporters, and the judge. Emmy clutched Clara's hand as the proceedings began. The judge invited Detective Holden to present the network's evidence. He brought charts, phone logs, farm worker records. "This chart shows Reed trafficking operations between rural farms," he explained. "Payments made through intermediaries. The Kesslers are listed as are Rowan Pledger's name and aliases." The Kesslers' defense lawyer objected hearsay. The judge overruled based on preliminary admissibility. Detective Holden continued. Emmy's attention sharpened at each detail. She absorbed words, but looked at Clara as if seeking reassurance. Next, Rowan took the stand, gaunt, subdued. Questioned on trafficking knowledge, he admitted facilitating farm labor, but denied knowingly abducting children. Under pressure, he revealed calls to criminal figures, owed debts, extorted payments. His voice broke. Emmy recognized the courage in him, betrayal and guilt carved into his face. She judged him not by the network alone, but by seeing him carry truth. When asked about Emmy, he paused. "I believed she was safe. I was lied to. But I can't change what happened." Emmy's throat tightened. Clara squeezed her hand. Rowan hung his head. The Kesslers followed. With their defense attorney guiding them, they admitted paying for a child, claiming ignorance, regret. Their voices trembled. Tears flowed. Clara found compassion, accountability can break a soul. Emmy glanced at them, and for a moment her face softened. Then she pulled back, dignity intact. Finally, the judge invited Emmy to speak on her identity, to decide if she would take the name Ella Marin legally or continue as Emmy Wells. The courtroom held its breath. Clara's heart pounded, anticipation sharp enough to cut. Emmy rose steadily. She walked to the rail, cleared her throat. "My name wasn't always Emmy Wells. It was Ella Marin. That child was taken from her mother. I lost my identity. But I found myself here. I am both. I cannot erase who I lived, but I want to own who I was meant to be. I choose Ella Amelia Wells Marin." I keep Emmy. I honor both families. I choose the truth. Silence. The judge nodded. So ordered. A clerk filed the amendment. Clara's throat burned. Tears welled. Emmy returned, hugged her mother. Clara whispered, "Your name, your truth." We left the courthouse late afternoon. Reporter lights flashed. Emmy looked composed, proud, serene. Clara walked beside her, protective, proud. They drove back to Asheville in silence mostly, but Emmy's voice broke through. "Mom, can we stop in town for a moment?" Clara nodded. They found the mural site where missing persons posters had once been plastered along Main Street. Now blank. Clara touched where Ella's flyer had hung. Emmy stood beside her. "How did you do it?" she asked, voice rough. Clara said simply, "One mother's refusal to let her heart die." Emmy wrapped her arm around Clara's waist. They stood a long moment in solidarity, memory healing. That evening they hosted a small gathering at the safe house. Detective Holden Brand and a counselor joined them for quiet conversation and supper. Detective Holden brought paperwork, new charges against trafficking ringleaders. "More arrests coming," he said. Emmy exhaled, relief flickering. Brand spoke of the tavern's future, a fund for trafficking victims run by locals. Emmy's eyes brightened. Over cornbread and stew, they planned Emmy would visit David next week. They'd meet at a cafe in Colorado Springs. Clara would stay for support. Then Emmy would apply for legal documents, birth certificate, amended Social Security, updated driver's license changed. A lawyer had offered pro bono help. As plates emptied, laughter and steady conversation filled the room. Emmy and Brand shared quietly. She'd found half a family, but maybe found her own path upward. Clara watched her daughter's bright spirit, stronger, freer than the night she vanished. Night deepened and guests departed. Clara and Emmy returned to the living room. Clara brewed tea. Emmy curled on the couch with journal in hand, recording today, the court, the speech, the name. Moments later, Clara tiptoed to her bedroom, but paused at Emmy's door. She looked in Emmy's sleeping pages, filled with thoughts and hopes. Clara smiled softly. She opened the door, sat quietly on the edge of the bed, and kissed Emmy's forehead. "You belong," she whispered. Emmy mumbled in her sleep, smile light. Clara left the room, heart full, yet wary of tomorrow. She remembered the daughter she prayed for, the woman she discovered truth came at a price. At dawn, Clara stepped outside. The Appalachian mist clung to the pines. A new day, new battles ahead. They'd correct records, file new charges, confront the trafficking ring fully. But for now, they had each other. The sun rose on those rolling hills, painting their path ahead with hope.